next presentation, well, this was more like the theoretical background and how things should work. This is more about how things do work, or how what we have seen up in the field. And in the field, you see a lot of things.
Now destroying my presentation.
No, I'm not destroying any. It was a beautiful presentation. Thank you very much. I again learned some new things on it, and that's always great. Yeah, and this is like a play. Yeah, maybe some of you know it. It's The Beauty and the Beast. And of course, in every play, we go into the theater and we look at the program leaflet and we ask, who is playing the beauty? And of course, there can be only one. There were several applicants like Mr. Workclock and so on. But the only one, due to her presence, omnipresence in television, can only be also known as the Black Beauty, the Black and Burst. And the beauty, let's characterize it a little bit. It's like, you would think it's a very simple character. It's just a black picture in analog SD. If you look in detail at the waveform, it's a little bit more complex. And you wouldn't want such a beautiful woman called a control freak, but I mean, checking the time 16,000 times a second. This is due to her being raised without a mother. She died very early, and she was living together with only her father, which was an inventor, and he's a little bit messy, and so she needs to take care of the household, which initially only included taking care of all those television lines, but later on she was also tasked with taking care of the color subcarrier phase, which required a great deal of precision and looking at all the small details. And that's why she's very, very careful about keeping the exact time. And she's also very particular about and demanding on, she wants to have her path into every household, her own individual path. She requires an extra cable everywhere. And while being very particular about this time, with checking the time every 16 seconds, she doesn't care about travel delays. I mean, if she travels anywhere, then it takes the time it takes. And yeah, it's a little bit, I mean, whoever is at the other end of the cable is giving her the time. I mean, she doesn't check if this is a legitimate source or something. What comes in is the time. So if this is the beauty, then the other question is, who is the beast? Who is playing the beast? And obviously there can be only one beast in this whole setup, and this is PTP, of course. Let's characterize PTP. It's also very specific about synchronizing clocks, synchronizing time, and it hides inside a complex path of complex network of paths in a castle, yeah, it's like a gloomy castle inside a complex path of network, and this can sometimes be intimidating to those who don't know the path through the network. It is very hierarchically structured. It has a central time source, and all clocks must run to this time source. It's a little bit more coarse than the beauty. The beauty is very delicate and the PTP only checks the time every 8 seconds. And while this checking the time every 16,000 times a second can be like a little bit of a pain for those who are more independent and want to have a more leeway for their own, they can better deal with a beast that is only checking every 8 times a second, although this can be different. And yeah, one beautiful thing about the beast is it's measuring and compensating for forwarding delays. So while the beauty just travels and it takes the time it takes, PTP checks the time it takes to travel and makes sure that the clocks on each side of the link or on the path are fully in sync. We have other participants, like more supporting castes. These are the villagers in the tail, for example, and these are some engineers who know the beauty for a very long. They grew up with her, and yeah, they have learned to live with her peculiarities, and sometimes they even love it, and they have dealt with all her shortcomings, and yeah, it's just they know her. Yeah. And at first they don't believe in the beast. They don't think it even exists. then they learn about the beast, that it exists, they fear it, and then they try to fight it. But that's not the end of the story. There are some other engineers, and they play the role of the castle inhabitants. They live with the beast. They are in the castle, and they have found ways to handle it, like giving it the hints that it does the right things. And they know that the spell on the castle will only be lifted if the beauty and the beast fall in love with each other. That's what we're working for. So to set the scene for this play, why do we want to be in sync in the first place? And Andreas have given some things about this. Is what I would say. It's about frequency, and this is the most important thing. As we heard, if we don't have the same frequency, it's the same for video and audio. We need sample rate converters, we need frame synchronizers, whatever, all the things we do not want to have. And so it's about frequency, but it's also about phase. Because if you want to switch video signals, if you want to align audio signals, you need to be in the same phase. And as I said, in earlier days, we need to be very, very specific about the phase, because if the color subcarrier was off, then the colors were off. But that's the reason why we want to be in sync. And the next question is, why do we know do we need to have hybrid environment? Because as Andreas already told us, PTP is perfect for everything. I mean, we just rip out all the black and burst and what clock and what have we, and all do everything with PTP, and that's fine. But very few projects are greenfield. You cannot just rip and replace everything. Some baseband devices might still be present. You take them over from your old system. Then there are still some 10-on-10 devices that need a black and burst signal or some other synchronization, traditional synchronization signal. And there are even devices that if you require them to be very, very precise, then they say, give me a black and burst, because it's checking the time every 16,000 times a second, and then I can be more precise if you really want the full precision. So in most cases, when we build systems, even 2110 systems, at one point or another, we come to a point where we say we still need a black and burst. It's just the reality that I've experienced. And so how do we bring the beast and the beauty together? In the play, it's like the father gets lost in the woods in a storm and is chased by wolves, and it goes to the castle, and then it's exchanged against the beauty and whatever. It's a very complicated thing. It's very difficult to translate this into technical terms, but luckily it's much more easy for us technicians. There's a standard, it's 2059, and this defines an alignment point on all the different synchronization signals. And yeah, that's how the beauty and the beast come together. It's just like Andreas told, we have a synchronized clock everywhere in the network, and we can create at every point in the network, we can create the synchronization signals exactly in the same way. So what can go wrong? There's a lot of things that can go wrong. I mean, the easiest things that are at the top with PTP, you have just the wrong settings. There is a domain setting, various timer settings. If you get them wrong, then probably something goes wrong. The most easy is if the domain is set to the wrong value, then it simply doesn't work for this device. Timer settings are a little bit more intricate, because if they're wrong, then yeah, in a failover case, you have strange things happening. We have a standard ISO 09 that was meant to overcome this, but I see it very, very sparely implemented, if at all. So, I mean, it's not a big deal. It's only a one-time setting in each device, but you have to do it in each device, set all the parameters. The most things we have come, there are still, I mean, maybe there will always be implementation-specific behaviors, I would say, because there are a lot of things that are not standardized, where it's up to the device manufacturer how to implement this, and everyone does it different. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't matter, and of course there are also bugs, because still a lot of device manufacturers are struggling with doing the PTP implementation correctly. And most of the time, PTP runs smoothly. So if you set it up correctly, if the first point is taken care of, then PTP will run smoothly. What doesn't work, or where you have problems, and this is, I advise you, if you're building a system, test this very thoroughly, are failovers, if something breaks. If it is in steady state, PTP is pretty robust and will just give you what you need. But if some failover, a grandmaster goes away, and so on, then the bad things tend to happen. There's also, if you have a large network and you have a lot of hops, if you have boundary clocks between in your systems, then errors tend to accumulate. It depends on the implementation of the boundary clocks, but that's just like it is. It's not like a delay accumulation, because the delay is always factored out, but the jitter tends to increase over the time. And that's why filtering and dampening is also an important factor in PTP, because you want to filter out and dampen this jitter. And so that's an important point, that different devices implement differently how they dampen away the jitter, or how they cope with grandmasters failing over. An interesting factor which we have discovered is environmental factor. We had actually two devices. One we discovered ourselves, and one we discovered, which we heard about, where the temperature caused a drift. And everyone was blaming PTP, because it was shown as an offset in PTP master clock, but it was the internal oscillator. And then we saw there was a drift in the PTP offset from the master, but actually it was not a PTP drift, it was the internal oscillator that was drifting with temperature. And there are devices where you simply discover that they have hardware limitations, or possible hardware limitations, where they cannot give you the accurate PTP timestamps. So caveats with black and burst. I'm not really considering myself a villager, so I'm not too familiar with that. But when troubleshooting things, that were the two things that came up most of the time. That we have a very complex sync tree, or that sync needs to be distributed. And if somewhere something goes wrong in this sync tree, then you have a bigger problem. And like on each device, you can set where the synchronization will come from. Is it input 1 to 6 or whatever, or is it an external blackburst? And if one device is having a problem here, then you have problems all the way downstream. Yeah, well, in hybrid environments, then, as I already said, it sometimes can be difficult to attribute who is responsible for what. So like you have this oscillator which is drifting, which is more like a baseband thing. But everyone is looking at the PTP offset and says, oh, my PTP is wrong and everything. And later you recover it's the other side. So there can be some arguments. Especially the villagers, they always like to blame the beast, of course. They have different failover mechanisms, like the black burst, or the traditional sync signal, it's just a switch from 1 to 1. And in the PTP, we have this grandmaster election process, and you need to make sure that they are kept in sync. And then there's this different accumulation of errors, mainly delay for black burst and jitter for PTP. So you have to make sure that this is kept in check. So what are our recommended best practices in hybrid environments? I would generate traditional signals in separate devices locked to PTP. So make PTP the master, and then generate the PTP, the blackburst and other synchronization from signals from that. And you can distribute it, because then you earn the delay compensation qualities from PTP. And if you have a large facility, then generate your traditional sync signals distributed in the different areas. And lastly, always remember, the spell is lifted when the beauty and the beast love each other, and everybody will live happily ever after. Thank you very much.